I'm J.R. Todd, and this is The Skinny.
Hey, I'm Ron Capps, and this is The Skinny.
From Fathead Studios in Speedway, Indiana, this is The Skinny. Rico Elmore, Ken Stout, welcome to The Skinny, and we've got a couple of big guys that are going to join us here today. NHRA superstars, both of them are champions. Ron Capps is going to join us from California, the 2016 Funny Car Champ, and the 2018 Funny Car Champ. Sitting in the studio, J.R. Todd. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, man. Thanks for having us.
So, Capps, you from 97 to 04, you were with Prudhomme. Can you take us inside what that conversation was like whenever he finally made the decision to pull the plug on it?
Snake?
Yeah. When he decided he had to close the doors on the team, and were you?
Well, he still had a funny car team and a dragster team when I left. But you got to remember, this was a tough time. The tobacco companies were under a lot of stress at that time. And mostly it was, the Marlboro and Winston's and all of them that were being affected by the government. But the smokeless tobacco, like Copenhagen and Skoal, like we were sponsored by, there was a lot going on. And the last year that I was there, we already kind of knew it was coming. I mean, I was being asked to not take pictures with kids that I couldn't because of these regulations with the government that were coming down. We saw Formula One where you just see a red and white car instead of a Marlboro on it. So there were a lot of weird things going on. And I'd been Skoal all those years, and then Copenhagen prior to that, I'd been with him 8 years, I think it was. So he wasn't going to probably have two funny car teams, and it was in jeopardy of not having any. So I had decided I should probably leave at that point, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So it was a tough moment for me, and probably the hardest thing I ever had to do. But he understood it, and luckily a job opened up with Don Schumacher, and ironically, Ed McCulloch, the ace, who I had driven for when he was my crew chief on the Skoal car, had been on the sidelines for a couple of years, and Don Schumacher had put him together on a potential deal with Brute Cologne, which I ended up going to, and surprisingly put us together after I left Snake. So it kind of worked out for me, and then obviously a year later, the whole tobacco thing kind of folded up for Snake, and he had a couple sponsors on his dragster, and then they kind of went away, and it was time for him, he said, just to enjoy the fruits of his labor and retire as an owner. So it was tough. It was, obviously, man, he was like a second dad to me. Like I told you, I learned so many things from him on and off the track, and that was tough to leave that team and a guy like that I just loved to wake up in the morning and make proud, go out and win a race and cut a light and do all that just to make him as proud as I could.
Enrico, you brought it up before, equally legendary status, Connie Coletta, and you're involved with them intimately. How involved is the old man to the everyday, the minute-to-minute stuff going on at the racetrack? Because there's never a round that he misses.
No, absolutely not. That's the thing. I feel like a lot of people outside of drag racing, or even some of the fans in drag racing, don't realize how involved Connie actually still is. I mean, he just turned 82 last month, I believe, and he's the crew chief on the dragster that Sean Langdon drives, the other DHL dragster. So he's at the shop pretty much every day, going over runs, trying to figure out how to make this thing faster than everybody else, and then, flies in on Friday and flies out Sunday night. So he's the one calling the shots on that car and has a lot of influence over the other cars as well. I mean, he's I feel like just as competitive as when he was driving. He's a lot like Snake, I would say. He expects a lot of us drivers, wants to win, wants to rip everybody's head off, and at the end of the day, like, he doesn't want to hear excuses why we did this or didn't do this. Just if you mess up, you better go own up to it, or he's going to rip your ass for making an excuse about it. Okay. And that's one thing I learned going into that deal in 2014 was like, hey, if you do something, go tell him what you did right away, and like, he'll get over it. He might bark at you a little bit, but he'll get over it. So that's kind of how I've been. I feel like we have a really good relationship. And for me, at the end of the day, if he's there when you win and he's waiting on you to, tell you did a kick-ass job and getting winner circle photos with you instead of getting on his jet and flying home, that's the ultimate.
Give me an idea like how the rivalries that exist before you guys came in. For example, a Don Schumacher and a Connie Coletta, obviously Snake in here as well, but those two old cats, like Schumacher and Coletta. How important is it when you line up next to a Schumacher car? Is it for you to beat him or a force? I mean, does he get up a little bit more for some of those guys?
Shoot, right now between the three teams, that's all there is out there now, it seems like. But yeah, I would say you definitely get up a little more when you're racing the JFR cars or any of the DSR cars, because they're at the top of the heap. And the Coletta cars, I don't want to say they're underrated. They're just, it seems like they're always right below those two top teams. So we definitely get up a little more for racing those guys. And like I said, the old man gives us everything we need, and that we need to go out there and to beat those guys. That's why it's great to have guys like TRD. I mean, they're exclusive to our car, basically. So we get a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that a lot of people don't know about, to go out there and try and knock off those Dodges and Chevrolets out there, which I think is really cool.
How about 2008, special moment as you stopped Tony Schumacher's streak, 31 consecutive round wins, 7 wins in a row, and you're the man that puts an end to it.
I was kind of a punk back then. Like, everybody thought it was cool. I got to get out of the car and, like you said, all those round wins and race wins in a row, and get out and salute him. Like, I know that pissed him off to no end. And like, when I learned that, like, well, every time that I beat him, like, I'm gonna keep doing it then, just because I know it bothers you that much. So like, I don't know. Looking back on, like, if that were to happen today, like, I probably wouldn't be obnoxious like that. But no, it made for good TV. And guys, like, I actually got a letter from NHRA. They're like, hey, if you do that one more time, we're going to fine you. Like, I forget what the amount was. So I told Selzy or something like that. He's like, listen, do it every time. I'll pay the fine. Like, don't worry about it. So, I mean, it was pretty cool back in the day. But now, like, Tony's been doing some commentating on our races and whatever. Like, to hear him say, like, good things about me, like, I respect what the guy's done. I mean, he's one of the greatest drivers of all time in our sport. So I feel like we put all that to the side and kind of a mutual respect for each other now, which I think is good.
You were kind of evolving. And then after the whole Lucas thing, and I mean, you kind of got smashed in your face. I don't really know how else to put it. You were out.
Right.
And the opportunity to get back in was pretty slim. There was a lot of touch going on at the time. And I told you this before, and I'll tell you now again, I respect what you did, because you never quit, and you did fight to get back. And however that was, or whatever that was, you went and ran some pro mod stuff and whatever it was you had to do, but you fought to get back. And it seemed like you respected it a lot more.
After 2008, I didn't have a full-time ride up until I got with Coletta in 2014. So I feel like that made me respect what I had a lot more. It's like, hey, if this opportunity comes around again, like, don't be a dumbass and screw it up. Make the most of it. And that's kind of the mentality that I've had now. Like, this could go away at any time, so you better enjoy it. Be a professional about it. Try and set a good example for others. The ones looking up to you. Because back then I never thought like that. Just like I said, just kind of a young punk, just living in the moment. Where now it's like, hey, you need to make the best of this if you want to do it for a living.
I mean, we did have some good dirt track drinking dreams come true.
I definitely became a huge sprint car fan from like 2009 to 2013. They were getting sick of seeing me at the tracks, that's for sure.
Hey, speaking of that, I got a question for you, Caps, because you've been in a lot of different cars along the way. I've been in a ton of debriefs, courtesy of my son's racing as well, afterwards. Whenever you have your conversations with a car engineer, crew chief, whatever it may be, say in a sprint car or a dirt late model or whatever the case may be, an IROC car, you're going to discuss, is the car a little tight? Is it a little loose? What can we do to this thing to get it to rotate better, to get it to go a little bit quicker, obviously? What types of conversations do you have with a crew chief when you climb out of a funny car? I mean, do you fill them in with, the car's pulling a little bit to the left? Or, I mean, what are those conversations? Maybe a half pound of air in a right rear tire? Or, how does that correlate with a oval track car, if you will, or a road course?
Well, it's a great question, because we don't, you get back and they upload the little cartridge off the car, what the car just did on that run. And if you saw this screen, I mean, they can have as many inputs as they want, but they've probably got 50 or 60 small inputs: cylinder temperatures, fuel going into the motor, G meter, tire temperature from an infrared sensor. all these little things, and they can pull up right away, and they know exactly, pull all the same stuff up every run, and they look to see if what they did worked and why it ran good or why it didn't. And really, they don't need any input from a driver most of the time. And some of the newer regime of crew chiefs this last decade or so are the younger group that maybe rely on their computer skills. And some of them probably never even put an actual engine together, yet everything's so electronic now. Whereas we used to have retarders for ignition, and now everything's done by a chip, little things like that. So, but I've always, and I've been lucky that I've had my group of crew chiefs I've gotten to work with in my career. You know, it would start off with Roland Leong, the Hawaiian, Ed the Ace McCulloch. I've had Tim Richards, the general, who won all the championships with Joe Amato. And then Ace again for all those years, who was a great mentor, crew chief, but also he's done it all in the past, has been a driver. And now with Ron Tolber since 2012, these are all guys that in their day, they got out and they looked at the parts every run. They either owned a car back then, they ran a car, or they drove and owned and ran a car back in the day. And so they had to really rely on running on their own dime, or they had their own car that they had to make sure they checked on things. So they're always really good at getting out and reading the plugs and looking at the bearings, things that a lot of these crew chiefs don't nowadays. And so I've always come back and given my input. And there is situations, and it's come up several times here, even this year, where it'll go out and shake the tires, or it'll have a rattle in it, and it's close to where I've had to pedal it. And he thinks it's going one direction, and he thinks making one change might fix it. And I'll have to tell him, like, no, it feels like it's doing this. And he'll come in the next day, maybe after sleeping on it, and he'll go, you know what, you're right. And he'll make that change. And then when the car goes out and hauls ass, it's a great feeling, because you feel like you gave back, rather than you're just you're up there stabbing this thing and hanging on to it. You're actually giving good feedback. And you know, I often joke, but I really wish they would have one race or go a few races where you disconnected the computers and went old school, where the driver had to give feedback to the crew chief for the next run and had to rely on that. That would be a true moment. And when I go race these nostalgia cars, that's what it is. A lot of them don't have computers. So that part's fun. And I can tell them what I feel in the car. Did it have a rattle that did this? Did the clutch lock up hard? Did it spin out there and rattle when it tried to lock up? Was it too hard of a lockup? Little things like that, you know, you're so much, you've worked on them before in your career, and you've grown up being proud that you could give feedback that's legitimate to a crew chief. And then having a crew chief that is a guy that will listen to you, either because he had to do that when he was driving as a younger guy in his career, or he just relies on knowing that you know what you're feeling in the car.
I was really curious, and that's I just got the answer. But the young gun crew chiefs don't even need feedback from a driver, and will go out and set that car up to go in a different direction, you know, if need be. It blows me away that they really don't need much feedback from you at all.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Jared.
When I first got into a funny car, like, I got in it after Del Worsham, who in my mind, pound for pound, one of the best drivers that's ever driven a car, because he knows everything about the car and he knows how to tune it. So he's the best of both worlds for,
him and his father,
for
right?
that
Forever,
car.
just
right.
wheeling, working on that car.
So he'll drive a car down a dirt road and not get out and bitch and complain about it. Like, if it's, you know, not handling right, like, he's not going to complain about it. To where me getting in, like, I didn't know any better. And then, you know, like, the crew chiefs are pulling up the lateral G's, you can see how much I'm steering it or not steering it. And then over time, we learn, like, hey, like, we need to upgrade what we're doing to the car. For me, you know, going talking to guys like Ron, he's like, yeah, I went through this. We had to change, you know, the steering on the car, like, just different parts and pieces, beefier parts to make it better for you to steer. Because there's times I'm crossing the finish line with my hands crossed up, trying to make the thing go straight. Like,
sure.
I'm like, something's not right here. And then,
you're only going 300 plus.
Yeah, and then, you know, like, get those new parts and pieces that some of the other teams have, and it's night and day different. Like, I'm not steering the car as much as I was, looking like an idiot. And I think that, you know, that I wouldn't have known unless I wouldn't ask somebody like Ron or some of the other, you know, pros that went through that just, it's kind of like trial and error, and they can see it on the computer. But at the same time, like, they're overlaying those runs with Dell's runs. Like, hey, like, he's not steering as much as you. I'm like, well, no kidding. Like, he's the man, and I'm basically a rookie out here trying this. But it worked out over time.
But that's what's allowing these kids, these rookie kids, to hop inside of a car. If they have a veteran crew chief They set the car up. The kids just got to get in it and drive it. And honestly, I mean, I don't want to make this, I'm not going to downplay anybody going 330 miles an hour inside of one of these cars. It's a handful. We get it. But, you know, a stab it and steer. And honestly, everything should function properly. You know, if it rattles tires, obviously you're going to have to get out of it.
Sure.
You know, and if it's going left or right, you have to put some wheel in it. But for the most part, those kids climb into those cars with a ton of confidence.
Hold on. Let this veteran come in here for a minute. I'm just no, you brought up a good point because, and you got to remember, because all what you guys cover on this show, we don't have the luxury of messing up an apex on a corner or not hitting the cushion right or just making a bad lap and coming around and making 2 good laps to make up for it. Like, you got 3.8 seconds to do the right thing. When you say stab and steer, the dragsters, I got some teammates that are dragsters. I don't mean to rip on them, but it is stab and steer. You don't steer them a whole lot. You kind of point these top field dragsters. The funny car, it's like a sprint car most of the time. We don't have the luxury of thinking, man, how could I make a better lap this next time? Or I made a mistake on that lap, I'm going to make the next one better. You go out and you either make the right choice without even thinking. You don't even react. You just act. And sometimes it's not the right choice, and you beat yourself up for it all night long. And on that subject we just talked about, I can't tell you how many times, and JR's probably done the same thing. You'll make a run on a Friday or a Saturday, and I'll wake up or sleep on it, and I'll wake up in the morning and I'll remember something that happened during that run. That little 3.8 seconds slowly comes out of your brain later on and expands. And I'll remember something that happened, and I'll call my crew chief or come in the lounge and say, hey, I forgot to tell you, it did this about 2.5 seconds. And he'll go and look, and he'll go, oh my God, I didn't even see that. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So these little things happen, and drag racing is so unique that we don't have a lot of the luxury of being able to have a second chance or having a second attempt to make something better. When you make a mistake, or you don't leave the line on time, or you do something in the car and you don't catch it, or you pedal it and you shouldn't have, you got to live with it, and it burns. It burns you for days. And if it happens on a Sunday, you got to wait until the next time you're in the car. And that part, you know, I think it really it's tough. It's tough to deal with.
Yeah, it's a great input. I've got a question for you, JR. I want you to take me for a lap. And whenever I say take me for a lap, all the fans that are listening as well, and we get the normal stuff. Okay, I'm going to start the car. I'm going to pull in pre-stage, stage. I'm going to take off. But I want to know, what is your system? What's your psyche when from the time they fire that car up and you're pulling that car in, you take off? What are you thinking about? I mean, are you waiting to see if this thing is going to rattle the tires? You know, what's going? Are you waiting to feel the clutches come in? You know, at half track. When you get the half track, are you immediately thinking it's almost time to pull in the chutes? And I get a kick out of what Ron said a little bit earlier. Clearly, his brain is going, and yours as well. His brain is going so fast that he's already thinking about climbing out of the car and getting after the other guy. So his brain's on fire. He's already processing all this information and thinking about kicking the guy's ass, you know, in the other lane. But I want you to take me for a ride. I mean, what is your system when they close that lid?
I mean, I feel like you're already thinking about what you're going to do. It depends if it's qualifying or race day also, because if it goes out there and rattles the tires and shakes, like, you're not going to pedal it. You're just step off the gas, basically. And you're also, like I said before the run, just kind of going through the run, thinking about like who you're running against, their staging process and what have you, listening to other cars in front of you going down the track. If it's hot and slick and not many cars are making it down, or if it's cold and guys are shaking. So once they start the car, I feel like you almost go into autopilot. You have it pretty much somewhat planned out what you're going to do on the starting line, depending on who you're racing against. And, you know, more than anything, you're so focused on hitting that reaction time, hitting the tree on race day. So you're focused on one of those lights. It's got to be like a hair trigger. I mean, to me, sometimes that's where the race is won and lost. And that's something that a lot of us work on during the week, is making ourselves better on the starting line. So you're so laser focused on that, hit the gas. And then if the thing goes out there and gets through the shake zone, you know, it makes it 100, 150 feet without rattling the tires, like, you feel like, all right, we might be home free now. You're focused on keeping that thing stuck down the center of the groove. If it's going to put a cylinder out on one side or the other, you got to kind of counter that with the steering wheel. Just more than anything, focus on getting that thing to the finish line and getting the chutes out on time. That's what I live for, is getting you see the finish line cones coming up, like, all right, we're home. Hit the parachutes. And hopefully they open, because sometimes they don't. But when those things open, you're like, we made it. It's over. Live to talk about it. But I mean, it's the biggest adrenaline rush that I've ever experienced. Also, like you're so jacked up. That's why people get out at the end of the track and say dumb things or do dumb things on camera. But at the end of the day, it's the ultimate rush, and it only takes one little thing with that car to throw you off, or John Force screwing with you on a start line to kind of throw you off, just because, like I said, you're so laser focused on the job at hand.
And that was always the thing with Force. Everybody thought he got out of the car and thought it was an act, and still, right?
Oh, that's how he is.
Well, he is, but still, he's jacked.
Right.
It's all that adrenaline.
When he gets
yeah,
out
I
of the
agree
car.
with you. I mean, that's a real deal. He's just wound up so much.
Maybe
adrenaline.
when he gets to be Chris Karamesini's age, the Greek's age, maybe he'll settle down a little bit.
I don't think so. I think he goes to the grave wound up. Man, how about the speeds? They cut this thing from a quarter mile, 1,320 feet, back to 1,000 in 2008. They were going 334 at the time, I think was fastest in 08. And now you guys are at 339, 1,000 foot.
Yeah, I think my top speed in 2008 in the top fuel car was 334. And just looking at the incremental times of the cars back then to what they are now, Ron might disagree and some other drivers might disagree, but we do not need to go quarter mile racing, because basically we would have to slow the cars down to go quarter mile racing just to even make it safe, or things would be way out of hand. I mean, some of the tracks that we go to, the cars have outgrown the tracks. I mean, we need that stopping distance. And Pomona, shortest track on tour, we race 1,000 feet, and guys are still running off the track into the sand with 2 parachutes out. I mean, like I said, these things are going almost 340 miles an hour now, and if we ran a quarter mile, I mean, it'd be insane how quick and fast we'd be going.
And I wasn't going there at all. I was going the other way, actually. I mean, are we going too fast again? I mean, do we need to make another change? We're going faster now than we were in the quarter mile.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I think 340, nobody wants to see us go faster than that. I mean, I think my top speed is 334, 335. I know Caps went 338 last year, I think it was.
339 last year, and then Robert Height snipped him right towards the end of the year, if I'm not mistaken.
I should remember that because it was against me again. Seems like everything's against me.
Hey, you said it, not me.
Right. But no, I mean, I think what we have now is a really good show. And it seems like ever since we went to 1,000 feet, like the racing has gotten better. I think it's closer. It's more on the driver on the starting line, and it's been more competitive. And I think the funny car class now has probably been the most competitive than it has in years past. So I don't see any reason to change it. I mean, the cars have not, in the last, 5 years or so, it's not like they're making big jumps in speed either.
I agree. Yeah, we don't need to go back to quarter mile. We really can't.
No, there's
talked about really
so fast. You got your tracks just aren't long enough now.
Yeah, that's the point. I mean, I always tell people, would you send a family member up into space in the space shuttle if you had no good plan to get them back to Earth? And that's the thing. We love going fast. I would love to go 340 miles per hour, believe me. But when you are more worried about getting on the chutes in time and getting the car stopped than you are actually of the run in 3.8 seconds and 11,000 horsepower beast, and you're more stressed about the shutdown area and getting stopped safely, it's not right. So they've talked about watering these cars down with tune-ups and putting some kind of a restrictor plate type of thing on them where it slows them down, and then going back to quarter mile racing. And, I can think of a handful of our most historic racetracks we go to that cannot add on to that shutdown area. There's just no room to make a longer track. And for that reason, we just need to leave it where it is. And like JR said, the race in the last decade has been the closest, the most tight, good side-by-side racing you've ever seen in our sport. And I think if you took the scoreboards away, the fans wouldn't probably, most of them, know the difference that you're going 1,000 foot or a quarter mile.
People know the difference because most of the tracks, the scoreboards at the quarter mile. If you move those, people wouldn't know the difference.
Vinny Knapp always said that the numbers ruined the sport. He said, line them up, put them side by side, let them go battle, and if they go side by side down to the finish line, the fans are going to be happy. But whenever they see numbers, they want to see a quicker number. They want to see a faster number. And he always proclaimed that it ruined the sport.
Yeah, I mean, the 1,000 feet deal, I I was very involved or very much around it when that changed. And the thing of it is, especially like at Indy, the scoreboard is at the quarter mile, but here's the thing. You actually, if you're down at the top end of the track, you actually get to see the car, right? You get to see what's happening when the car comes down. So, I mean, there's also more of the show that you get to pick up after it's done. Pro stock bike. I mean, I don't know about pro mod. I mean, that's still up in the air. But, I mean, those guys, the way they run, I mean, it's they put a show on a quarter mile, right? And it seems to be pretty safe. But I used to be, of the thinking of, hey, there's some tracks that'll take the quarter mile and there's some that won't. And then, it just gets to the point where it is, a lot of friends in this series and, people that you want to make sure safe, and it's not worth it. It's just what Cap said, it's like, you send a loved one to space and not really sure how you're going to get them back, but we're going to send them.
I know. I remember I covered drag boat racing for many, many years, up until Lucas Oil, unfortunately, the series demise a year ago. So, but I remember in 2008, whenever they went through 1,000 foot with NHRA, they followed suit over, with fuel boats on our side as well. And there's no question that it saved some lives. Well, I don't say it saved lives. It saved some crashes.
Sure.
Which probably saved some lives.
That was a good story too. Snake talking about running a drag boat. That was another one. He said Caps, do you know, have you ever heard that?
Yeah, he just told me never to get in one. I think the joke was, I think they drug test them, and those ones that fail the drug test are the drag boat guys. They're nuts.
That makes total sense.
I heard the story one time. I can't remember it exactly, but it was something to that effect of, you don't want to get in that. So
we actually have a really good mutual friend from TRD. He came out of off-road, and talking about Shaggy, I know you know Shaggy as well. Yeah. And it's pretty amazing the stuff that little Brit comes up with, and the way he looks at stuff and the things he thinks of. And I know he'll go out I think he really brought a lot of not tire technology, but a lot of tire grip and measuring track temps, those sort of things, which really helped the team out.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a couple guys now that's their dedicated job. Like TRD will send them to each race for us, and they're relaying, track temperatures and grip numbers to the crew chiefs, where the crew chiefs don't have to leave the pit area or the trailer to go look at the track, just because these guys are constantly feeding them information. They have different grip machines that TRD has developed for us. And not only that, we get guys like Slugger Labby, who's a, NASCAR crew chief, who's now working at TRD. He sees things differently than what, these crew chiefs do, because these crew chiefs been around it their whole life. They kind of get stuck on certain things, and he looks at a different perspective. Like, why don't you guys try this? Like, oh, well, we never thought about that. And just things like that, I think, is an advantage for us. It's helped, our chassis department, and, eventually we're going to have a new body in the works, and things like that are going to go a long ways for us at Colettas.
Shaggy heavily involved, with the midget program when they were, or well, still are, when they were enjoying a lot of success there, and you always see them at the Chili Bowl. Also heavily involved in NASCAR. Those guys are struggling over there. Toyota was struggling a couple of years ago. Suddenly Shaggy goes over there, and I think that's when Kyle Busch went on his
turned him right around.
Yeah, went on a win streak. And I'm not saying it's all Shaggy, but Shaggy was part of that program. Shaggy is part of the program whenever we were when Johnny Greaves was dominating and off road, and he comes over to drag racing, and I remember thinking, what's he
going to bring?
What can you do here?
Yeah, well, I mean, what are you going to do there? And he was a large part of Ganassi's team when they were running Lexus engines 24 hours a Daytona, multiple wins over there with Scott Pruitt and those guys. I mean, he's won everywhere he's gone. He's been phenomenal. But when he came to drag racing, I'm like, I don't even get it. Like, it's not even your style engine. Where are you going with that? But he did exactly what you said. He started looking at things completely different and bringing a lot of other elements to the table to start monitoring and trying to get control over some of the variables that were not being controlled.
Absolutely. The cool thing for me is I've gone to both TRD facilities, the one in Costa Mesa and the one in outside of Charlotte. and you just see the behind the scenes stuff that they're doing for all different forms of motorsports that they're involved in. Like it's mind blowing. You can see why they do whatever it takes to win. Like they don't accept like not winning basically. And like you said, how can you help drag racing? Like, there's basically nothing you guys can do. Like, well, think again.
So you were at Motorsports Day last 2 years ago at Toyota.
Mm-hmm.
Remember when they unveiled the new Supra?
Right.
And they had Onkyo Toyota on there, Mr. Toyota. And all of this racing comes from him. He still races road races and goes in under assumed names. They don't have any idea that that's who it is. It's running and and things like that. But, at the end of the day, that stuff excites him. I mean, when Kyle won for the first time, the championship, and, the first time, Leffler won at I guess it was O'Reilly, Lucas Raceway Park, whatever out here now, when Leffler won out there, it was the first ever Xfinity race, that they won. And so he was always involved with this. And it's interesting. One of the people that was really a big, really had a lot to do with it was David Illingworth. And David was the one that was really involved in motorsports, but I always remember when Toyota got involved in drag racing, it was with David Powers. Mm-hmm. And, the interesting thing was the truck brand manager was the one that was spearheading this. I was like, okay, hold on a minute. Why is the truck brand manager, running the drag racing program? But they were just given vehicles, right? So they weren't this, but then you put Ed Laukus in, my great friend, and Ed Laukus starts taking the motorsports program to these different steps and starts, getting people like Shaggy in place and getting Slugger and all these different guys in these different places, these engineers, Tyler Gibbs at TRD, of course, David Wilson, who's still there, the president, and all these guys. And I mean, they have an unbelievable deal. And I mean, I don't get why. I mean, I do, but I don't. Why doesn't all the other manufacturers do it? I mean, they're showing a lot of success with it. I mean, Caps, I'm sure you guys have some support with Mopar, or do you not, or how does that work?
Yeah, we do with Dodge, especially with bodies. That's the really big deal. You see what TRD and what they've done when they came into drag racing right off the bat. I mean, they showed that they did not want to mess around, and really that they sent us back to the drawing board to make a better funny car body. And, it's always better when more people are coming and being more involved, especially from the technical side of it. When I started with Don Perdome's, we got to go to the GM wind tunnel with our funny car, and that was the first time. That was cool. And, things like that you just don't see anymore, and that kind of all went away. And it, the funny car bodies, there are so many limitations on them. You can't get crazy, which can be a good thing. But I think really all the technical stuff that these manufacturers are bringing in are really raising the bar for everybody to get better and better.
Yeah, I mean, it started way before that. I mean, Caps, it was like when Alan Johnson first started funny car racing with Selzy. They had that Toyota Celica, and I've seen pictures of that thing within the last couple months. And you look at that compared to our funny cars now, like, holy cow! Like, looks like a spaceship almost. The massive wing on it and all that. Like, they've come a long way since when they first entered. It's cool to see the progression.
Like Force and Ford they had a hell of a program going there for a while too.
Yes, sir. Yeah, a lot of R&D and wind tunnel time, and I think that's kind of what TRD is trying to push the limit on getting back to that, like spending time in the wind tunnel down in Charlotte with the NASCAR guys and getting us more time with the funny car, just learning what little things we can do to make it better, to be competitive with the Dodge and the Chevy and the Ford, just because our body right now, it's so much older than what those guys are running, but still mostly competitive also.
Have either one of you guys have they ever put one on a shaker rig? Is that something that would apply?
They've put a chassis on some of a shaker rig just to see what it would take to break one, I think, but not like what NASCAR is doing with their stuff, which TRD has their own shaker rig there for that kind of stuff. It's pretty awesome seeing seeing that thing work.
You never know what you might learn when you put something on there, right?
Yeah, I mean, the coolest thing that I saw at TRD, like Caps would love this, is their simulator, where they'll take all these kids, say the ones they're bringing through Keith Coons's and what have you, to see if they can make it in pavement. They'll stick them in this simulator for hours at a time, and it's so lifelike. They can make any changes they would make at the track on a car within this simulator. It's like a huge $1 million video game, basically. And I can tell you that I have no business in a Cup car.
Here's what we learned.
Right, yeah. I think that's why they stuck some of us in there, just to make sure we didn't need to be drag racing. But, yeah, they learned, like, man, these guys suck.
I actually heard that while they're running a race or if they're practicing whatever, they will try things on the sim and say, hey, this worked right here, and they'll send it out to the team, and they'll make those adjustments, and it applies.
Yeah, there's a guy there full-time. I can't remember what his name is, but he's a past driver, and he'll try every, setup that these teams, the Gibbs team, send him, and he'll tell you which is the best. What if they send him, they'll plug that into the cars at the track, and there you go. That just saves, like, Kyle Busch and those guys don't need to go to the simulator because they can rely on that guy there. They trust him that much.
The best thing possible is having my simulator here at the house. So we've been putting races together. Rico was in, I told JR he was in last night, jumped in a sprint car at Eldora. And of course, there's Rico, second on the list up there, trying to keep up with him. And Larson, those guys are they're having a blast. So it's going to be fun this next couple of weeks on iRacing.
It's taken off, the iRacing thing. I mean, nobody's racing, so they're all jumping on iRacing. And I've heard rumor mill stuff possibly even show up on a network, so I'm kind of curious to see where it goes.
I know that Ron's been involved with that stuff, from day one. Like, somehow I wish we could get them involved in drag racing. Like, I don't know that it'd be as lifelike as, the Cup cars and dirt track, but I think it'd be pretty cool to have a drag racing simulator, because everybody thinks, well, you guys just run down a 2-lane track. It can't be that different. But every track we go to is different. They all have their own characteristics. It's not just a matter of hitting the gas and, pointing that thing straight. Like, you got to maneuver some stuff at some of these tracks we go to. And I think it'd be cool to experience that on a simulator.
Caps, keeping up with all the road racing stuff and oval track stuff, a lot of the road track guys will come off of a track. And, of course, they'll write notes, in turn 7, there's this, there's a sealant line, that will give some grip if you enter a little bit low and come out higher, whatever the case may be. You write some notes. Do you guys do any of that sort of stuff at a drag strip to kind of refresh yourself?
I probably should. We a lot of times we can rely on what the crew chief notes are on their run. I know some drivers will get out and they've got a book and they'll write down a bunch of notes. I probably should. And I probably should have been this whole time in my career. I don't. I'll kind of go up based off of what our track specialist might tell me about a lane, whether it was like last year and what we did there. And I can go back and look at footage of what the car did. But no, to that extent, I don't make notes like that.
Yeah, same way. I mean, I probably should, because there's times you get to a track and it's been a year since you've been there, and it'll, suck you one way or the other. Like, oh man, why the hell didn't I remember that? But yeah, I think if you had that on iRacing, you go there a week ahead of time on your simulator rig, like, yep, I remember that. There's a bump here, or the track's crowned real bad this way, or what have you. Just, I think that would help.
Awesome stuff, man. Well, I'll let you guys go. Had you on this thing already for a good bit over an hour here, and I know you've got a lot going on, and a lot of people trying to grab you and spend a little bit of your time for you. We appreciate you taking the time out there on the West Coast to call in and sit with us for a bit, Ron.
The one good thing about this lull is I get to do stuff like this with you guys. So thanks for asking me, JR and Rico and Cannon. Man, you guys keep it up. It's a great show.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And, of course, JR, thanks a lot for everything, man. We know you've got a lot going on here as well, and a busy team and a busy season ahead of you. Hopefully we all get to go racing here again soon. This is without a doubt a bummer, but thanks a lot, man, for everything, and best of luck here this year.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Like I said, anytime I can come in and help you guys out, I'm all for it. We definitely got some time right now to do some fun stuff.
I'm trying to figure out, JR, where do they get the name The Skinny?
That's kind of what I was wondering as well. I wondered the same thing.
I think there's a little fat joke hiding in there, Rico.
I don't know, man. I'm looking. Maybe you should have called it something else.
Two fat guys in a desk.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, here, let me get my chair down a little bit more here. It's better.
Thanks for watching this episode of The Skinny. Be sure to check out all the latest sun and optical eyewear at fatheads.com. Special thanks to our sponsorship partners at Elliott's Custom Trailers and Carts. This has been a production of Fathead Studios. Please remember to subscribe.